Attorneys at Caster Semenya are preparing a fresh bid to have the controversial testosterone regulations scrapped. The former Olympic and world 800-metre champion was barred from competing at the Tokyo Olympics. A story published by the British Journal of Sports Medicine indicated that evidence has now been corrected. To chat more about this matter, we are joined by Professor Steve Cornelius, Head of Department of Private Law, Coordinator of the Centre of Sports Law. Good morning, Professor. It's all very confusing at this point. Can you shed some light on which study in particular is being referred to that is now supposedly being corrected?
Good morning. Thank you. Yes, I think even for me it was a bit confusing when this news broke. There was a study that was published by one of the IAAF's medical commissioners, Dr. Berman, who used samples taken for anti-doping purposes to also correlate the testosterone levels of athletes. And that study was done as a result of the case previously that was brought by the Indian athlete Duty Chand against the previous version of the regulations. And the Court of Arbitration for Sport then said there's not enough evidence to support the regulations, so World Athletics, or the IAAF as they were then, had to go back and find more evidence. So that study was published. Almost immediately after it was published, a lot of sports scientists and medical experts and endocrinologists questioned a lot of the findings in the study. The methodology was flawed. There was what Professor Ross Tucker and some colleagues referred to as phantom data, where the data could not be correlated with any of the actual data collected, and so on. And from the outset, it was said that this is a very flawed study. And that was the study primarily that the IAAF relied on at the time to pass the current version of the regulations. And now at last, they've actually come back and acknowledged that the study was flawed. I think their retraction, or their correction, as they would call it, does not go far enough. It says it could be misleading. The study is fatally flawed, and that's what they should actually be saying.
In short, Professor, what exactly has been corrected about said study? There's obviously reams and reams and reams of information, but what exactly about the study has been corrected?
Well, the study seems to suggest that in certain events there's a direct correlation between the testosterone level of the athletes and the level of performance of the athletes. And that was one of the aspects that was mentioned, that it's not possible. The study is flawed, so it's not possible to make the correlation. And it's that aspect basically that the IAAF is now corrected to say, well, it could be misleading, and perhaps there is not necessarily a direct correlation that can be taken from this study. For instance, some of the male athletes who were world champions showed hypotestosterone. So in other words, they had extremely low testosterone levels, even lower than most of the female athletes. So that immediately puts it into question. How can you make this link if some of the world champions have very low levels? Now, of course, one way to argue that is to say perhaps some of them at least could be indicative of doping and taking anabolic steroids. But we can't be certain if we don't have the evidence. And that is why the study was never reliable.
So then the question begs, what are the implications of this corrected study now being retracted seemingly?
I think there's a bit of a sinister plot going on here. And I'm not one very much for conspiracy theories, but I don't expect this to be a moment of the World Athletics saying, oh, we apologize, we made a mistake, or we want to correct the mistake. I actually suspect they are setting the pace for themselves to extend these regulations to other events in future, and pretty soon, I suspect. Because at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, the legal team and the medical team for World Athletics did present other evidence. And they referred to that in some of their communications issued now recently, that there is other evidence that they have made available to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and based on that, the Court of Arbitration for Sport upheld these regulations. The problem is they will not publish that research, ostensibly because it is confidential and it can disclose confidential medical information about athletes. The truth of the matter is actually, if it should be published in a peer-reviewed journal, then it will be exposed as the same flawed research, because it's the same research that they've just extended a bit. And we obviously, as part of the team that went to Lausanne for the Court of Arbitration case, did see that research. Our medical team, which was some of the best medical people in South Africa, statisticians, we really had a very strong team that went, pulled that research apart as well. So if they should publish it in a journal, in any academic journal, it will be discredited. But they can now hide behind the fact that it was submitted to the Court of Arbitration. I'm not sure if the Court of Arbitration for Sport had the medical expertise to understand all the research that was done, perhaps. But my suspicion is, in the wake of Christine Mboma's silver medal in the 200 meters, and because of the storm that's now erupting around her head, similar to Caster Semenya, I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 6 months or year we see these regulations extended to all track events, at least. And the argument's going to be, well, the research, we've now said the research doesn't show a correlation, so don't rely on that, but we've got other research to back it up.
Quickly, before we let you go, we are running out of time. In simple terms, what does this mean for Caster Semenya and her potential return to a favoured 800-meter event?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see. Her legal team has already indicated that they will take this matter up. Perhaps I'm wrong that I might believe that these regulations will now be extended further. If I'm wrong and they manage to challenge this, then perhaps we can get somewhere. And perhaps, hopefully, also some of the other athletes like Christine Mboma coming through in Namibia now will take up the fight further that Caster Semenya has started. Because this is really, if an athlete is female, then the athlete should compete to the best of her natural abilities. And these regulations simply should not be there.